Alright, welcome to Kojo's Pre-Algebra. I promised you this video would be shorter than the last video, and it will be. Today we're going to work on solving multiplication and division equations. And how are we going to do that? Well, we have 15x equals 45, and we have to manipulate the equation, and we have to use the inverse operation of what's being done to the variable, and what's being done to the variable is we're multiplying it by 15. So the inverse operation is what? Division. So we're going to divide both sides by 15, and yes, you must show your work like this. What I want you to do is I want you to create many fractions, because fractions stand for division. I don't want to see the division sign divided by 15 on both sides. I want to see fractions on both sides. So when we do that, the 15's cancel and it becomes x, and what's our goal of solving an equation? To isolate the variable and have a coefficient of positive 1, which we accomplish by dividing by 15. Then we get 45 divided by 15 is 3. So, x is equal to 3, we do a quick mental check, we see that's true. Here we have 2/3 x equals 10. Here's how I want you to show your work. There's a reason that we can do this. If we know, what are we going to do? You think, oh, we're going to divide both sides by 2/3. But when we divide by fractions, what do we actually do? What do we do when we divide by fractions? We take the reciprocal and change it to multiplication. So, because we know that, we're going to go ahead and skip the step of showing dividing by 2/3. So we're going to multiply giant parentheses. This is how you must show your work. Giant parentheses. Whenever you see a fraction as a coefficient, that you're going to take the reciprocal of the fraction and multiply both sides by the reciprocal. So it becomes 3/2. When we do that, we're going to accomplish of achieving a positive 1 of the coefficient of x. So x equals, because those cancel out, because 3/2 times 2/3 is 1. Any number times its reciprocal is 1. And then we've used 10 times 3/2, which is going to be 30/2, which is x equals 15. If this fraction doesn't simplify to a whole number, I want you to keep it in fraction form. I don't want you to worry about putting it in a decimal. You can put it into a decimal unless it's a repeating decimal or a non-terminating. If it's a repeating decimal, I do not want you to change it into a decimal. If it's 2/3, I don't want 0.67. or 0.6666 with a line over it. No, we're beyond that. I want you to leave it as a fraction. Now, if it comes out as a terminating decimal, then by all means you can change it to, like, if it's 3/2, you could change it to 1.5. But I want you to leave it in fraction form if it doesn't come out. Now you can change it to a mixed number, but you don't have to. Because later you'll see that if I plug in a mixed number into an equation to see if it's true by checking it, it's much more difficult because I got to take the mixed number and put it back into an improper fraction in order to simplify it. So I kind of like you to leave it into fraction form unless it comes out even. Alright, now that allows us to get into the mathematical reasons behind why can we manipulate the equation with multiplication and division. We can do that because of the two properties: multiplication property of equality and division property of equality. That allows us to manipulate the equation. Remember, we always have to have a mathematical reason why. So let's start with this one. If we're multiplying the variable by 2, how do we undo that? The inverse operation is to divide. So therefore we're going to use the division property of equality. We're going to divide both sides by 2. Notice how I drew my fractional lines. I must do this vertically. I have to show that. You have to show that the 2's cancel. We're left with a coefficient of 1. Some students right now like to write 1x. That's fine if you want to do that. That's not incorrect. Equals 3. We do a quick mental check. 2 times 3 is 6. We did that correctly. Over here it's a little something different. We have the variable in the numerator. Now, this is a fraction, so how are we going? It's division. It's representing division, and how do we undo division? That's how you have to think about it. You may say, oh, well, you know, this represents a fraction multiplied by a variable, but fractions represent division. So because fractions represent division, how do we undo division? What's the inverse operation? It's to multiply. So when we have fractional coefficients, we have to use the multiplication property of equality. Now here, some students get mixed up and they do this. They say 3 over a. That's a no-no. You do that, then watch what happens. Everything cancels, you're left with 1, and you've got 36 over a. You didn't do any good. You didn't do yourself any good or any favors. So you don't do that. If the variable is in the numerator, you kick it out. So, let me just do that. So you kick it out. So we're going to put that over here, and we're going to put the coefficient of 1 in front of the a, because if it's a over 3, it's really 1a over 3. So what am I going to do? Giant parentheses, and I'm going to multiply it by the coefficient of the variable. If the variable is in the numerator, it's the same thing as writing this. If I have a over 3, it's the same as 1/3 a. I can take that a out of the numerator and push it to the side. If, however, it's 3 over a, it's still 3 over a. You can't take an a out of the denominator unless you do something to it. This one you can just kick it out, because if it's in the numerator, it's telling you it's okay. So we're going to multiply both sides using the multiplication property of equality. We have to undo this fraction and maintain our a. So we're going to multiply by 3 over 1. Let me see if I can get that darker. 3 over 1, sorry about that. When we do that, the a doesn't cancel. See that? The 3's cancel. And then you have 1a over 1, which is a. That's our goal, is to isolate the variable. And then we get 12 times 3 over 1, which is 36. Okay? Alright, so what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video, and I want you to write these problems down, and I want you to do these problems. Okay, this is 3x over 4 equals 5, d over 3 equals 4, 5 over x equals 6, and 4y equals 20. I want you to pause the video, I want you to do these problems, and when you're done, start the video and we'll go over them. Welcome back! Let's see how you did. This one was tricky. Let's see if you did that well. This one too was tricky, because you have 3/4, so you have 3x over 4. Alright. I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal of 3/4. The x can kick out. I don't have to show the x kicking out. I can just multiply by the reciprocal, which is 4/3. So I multiply both sides by 4/3. I get a coefficient of 1x. And then I get 20 over 3, and I'm going to leave it that way. Here I have d over 3 again. I don't have to kick this out, but I understand that the d is in the numerator, so the coefficient is 1. So I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. I don't cancel the d out, because d doesn't cancel with 1. I cancel the 3's. The 3's cancel, and I'm left with 1d. And then I multiply the other side by 3, so I get 12. This one was 4y equals 20. I think hopefully everybody got that. Divided both sides by 4, y equals 5. Notice I'm using fractions to show my work on both sides. This one, the x was in the denominator. And remember what I said just a few minutes ago? I said that you can't take the x out of the denominator without doing something. Well, we don't want to move the 5. We need to get that x out. So we're not going to multiply by x over 5, because then if we do that, we're left with 1. And we're going to go back to that thing remember when we moved everything around with the variable in the denominator? So we just multiply x over 1. So we leave the 5. What that does is it transfers the x to the other side, manipulating the equation. So when we do that, the x's cancel on the left side, and we're left with 5. And then we have x over 1, which becomes 6x. Then we go and undo it, because now we have multiplying both, we have the multiplication going on. So to undo that, we use the division property of equality. We divide both sides by 6, and we get x equals 5/6. That's our answer. Now, if you see what happens, if we go back and we plug in 5 over 5/6, that's called a compound fraction. 5 over 5/6 is a giant fraction that's called a compound fraction. How do you simplify 5 over 5/6? You rewrite it as 5 divided by 5/6. Voila! You have division of fractions. What do? You take the reciprocal of the second number and you change it to multiplication, and you get 5 times 6 over 5. The 5's cancel and you're left with 6. Remember that, compound fraction. Alright, now what I want you to do is I want you to write 2 things that you've learned and 1 thing you still have a question about. And I'll see you in class tomorrow. Have a great evening.